Hey everyone, my name is Mike McGann. I am in marketing with GSI Incorporated. I'm also very pleased to welcome our main presenter, Ed Gutkowski, Chief Architect of RapidReconciler here with GSI. Now, before we get started, I want to give you a chance to review our safe harbor statement. Hopefully you guys can read that. Okay, now for a quick overview of today's meeting, it's going to last about 60 minutes. First, we'd like to take a moment to go over a couple of housekeeping items, as well as provide a brief company overview, and then we'll turn it over to Ed to get to our main presentation, which will last about 40 minutes. So, and then we'll wrap it up with a 10-minute Q&A session. If you would like to submit a question, you can do so through the Q&A panel on your Zoom dashboard. Thanks, Ed. Please note that questions will be answered at the end of the presentation. Now for our GSI company slide. For a brief company overview, we just want to take this moment to make sure you understand, why is it a good idea to partner with GSI? GSI is a full-service ERP, SaaS, cloud, ITSM, cybersecurity reseller, consulting, and managed services organization. Advanced AI and automation are used in all of our products and our services as well to help our clients reduce TCO and increase ROI, our favorite set of three letters, especially when next to each other. We have offices nationwide and partners worldwide, which allows us to offer a 24/7 global support model. And we're the only partner you'll find in the industry that has 100% guarantee on everything we do. If you want to find out more about that, we stand behind that. Feel free to reach out to any of us. Now I'd like to turn things over to Ed. And Ed taught me 3 times how to pronounce his last name, but you guys don't have to worry about that. That just shows the attention to detail he has. So Ed, take it away, buddy.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Let me start by giving you a little bit of background about myself. I've been working with JD Edwards, particularly in the distribution arena, for over 20 years. Way back when I first started, one of the very first things that I was asked to do was to go to a client and help reconcile their inventory. Well, that did not go very well, unfortunately. Tried to do it by the book, and the book said to run all these integrity reports, start looking at the output, start addressing some of the issues. But when I attempted to run some of the standard reports, there were quite a few pages involved, and it became apparent quite quickly that this process could use a little help as far as being streamlined to help get right to the point. So over the course of the next several years, I started looking into a way to help streamline this whole process and actually take the stress out of it. I've been presenting this subject for about 15 years now. I've presented at InFocus, Collaborate, and various regional user groups over the years, and we've had quite a positive experience with it. So what I want to do this afternoon is to kind of take you through the evolution of this and to show you how we can help you take some of that stress out of your reconciliations. Okay, so first of all, where does this stress come from? Well, as part of the reconciliation process and period end close, one of the main things that we need to do is reconcile our subledgers to the general ledger. Okay, so there are many different subledgers that we do. The ones that we focus on with our RapidReconciler product are going to be the perpetual inventory, goods in transit, and receive not voucher. So that process typically involves, and I'm going to focus on inventory to start. It usually means I need some type of reporting. So I'm going to get an inventory report out of my system. And in most cases, when I ask a prospective client how they get that report, It's a snapshot that's taken on the last day of the month at a certain time of the day when everybody's supposedly off the system and all the work for the period is done. And we're going to take a snapshot of that inventory and true that up to the general ledger. So we have our inventory data, and our inventory data is going to consist of maybe branch plants and item numbers and quantities and costs. And we're going to get a balance for every item. We're going to add them up. And then we're going to compare that to like a trial balance report that comes out of the general ledger. Well, that comparison now is typically done in Microsoft Excel. So now you as a person are left to group some of this information. Like on the inventory side, what you don't see is you're not going to see an account number, right? So I'm going to see branches, items, locations, lots, and quantities, but I'm not going to see a GL account number where I can go ahead and match these up. So then what that means is typically I have to group things by the GO class code, say this population of items are what's supposed to be in my raw material account. These are supposed to be finished goods, et cetera, et cetera. So all of that effort, I put the numbers together, I get the balances, they don't match. And of course, that's where all of this stress comes from, right? So what do I do now that the numbers don't match? Well, let's talk about some of the problems that are associated with this process. So first, that process is manual. As I just went through, you have to take data, right? You might get it in Excel format out of the system already, right? But they are separate reports typically, right? So you'll get an inventory spreadsheet, you'll get a GL spreadsheet. Now you're off to the races and you have to combine the data manually, which takes a lot of time, okay? Once you do combine it and you notice that there's a significant discrepancy in the numbers, where do you start looking, right? So you have items on one side, accounts and on the other. How do you go about doing this? So that's another issue. And then finally, if you get your transaction detail reports where you start focusing on individual transactions, there's a lot of them, right? So it's going to take forever to get through this whole process. So that's just kind of gives you an idea on the high level where these problems exist. Okay, so the solution that GSI has built for this is called RapidReconciler. And some key facts about the product is it's specifically designed for JD Edwards. So again, personally, I built this product. It was designed for JD Edwards. That's where my experience lies. We recognized that there was an opportunity for improvement in this process. So we did design something to help streamline it and take some of the stress away, okay? The modules that we do cover are perpetual inventory, goods in transit, and RNV. And the reason that we focused on these three modules is because this is where the issues seem to be, and there wasn't really a good native solution. Okay, so we were focused on this. Our customers were telling us that they were having problems in these areas, and that's why we focused on those particular subjects. Okay, now what this is it's an automatic daily process. So when we install it and configure it, there is a batch process that runs once a night, typically takes less than an hour to complete. You can do a reconciliation every day if you wanted to. Okay, so the typical process now, when you look at this, I do it at the end of the month. I'm not really looking at it until period end close. All the problems for the month accumulate. Now during the close is the time that you would normally address them. With the RapidReconciler process, you can look at it every day. You can stay ahead of things. We can show you ways to adjust your system or change some configurations that will reduce the number of reconciling items. And over a little period of time, a short period of time, once you address the issues, now your system just starts working. You can drop down to maybe a once a week or twice a month type frequency, and everything will just stay in balance, and you won't have to spend all this time during the close. Okay. One important thing that we'll cover is that we categorize all the variances. So you're going to see a breakdown of the variances into 4 different categories. It's important to understand what those categories are because each one of the 4 has a different corrective action. So depending on where the problem is, guides how you actually apply the fix. Okay, so what does a reconciliation with this product look like? Well, what you see on the screen here in this area is something that you'll see on the home screen when we actually go to the product itself. Now, the very first thing that you'll notice here is there's a valuation section on top. When, again, we're using inventory as our model. You'll see a valuation section, and in that section we have two numbers: what the general ledger balance is and what your perpetual inventory balance is. And the out of balance is just what's the difference between the two. So the very first step of the process is we're doing a quick visual and say, are we in balance or not? Okay. Well, if we were in balance, the out of balance would be 0. And guess what? There's nothing else to do because our goal is to get these two numbers to match. Okay. Since in this particular case, the number doesn't match, we're $1.5 million off, there's work to do. So now what? So the next thing to do is to come down to the variance calculation section, and here are all the different categories of variance that there are. Okay, so the whole trick to understanding how to do this is just to know what these line items are and how to make the proper corrections to get any number that's not 0 here to be a 0. Okay, so that's the whole goal. Let's take the variances out of the equation. Once we do that, then these numbers go into balance. Okay, so now what we have to do is we see that there are some non-zero numbers here. So what do we have to do to correct these? So again, we are looking at understanding what each of these line items are. I'm going to go over them real quick and you'll see how simple this can be made to be. Okay, so first, the carry forward, and you'll notice that RapidReconciler is going to be a database, and it will contain reconciliation data across multiple periods. And one of the selections you have for filtering is what period you want to look at. Okay, so if I'm reconciling, so let's say it's October, and I want to reconcile period end September, I have period September selected, and the carry forward means, you know what, in August, I did not zero things out. I'm carrying forward $42,000 of variance. Okay, so that's the roll forward check that we do, is to make sure that when we carry forward, this number here equals the out of balance from the last period. And there's indicators that tell us whether they do or they don't. Okay. Now, to that, what we're going to do is we're going to add some of the variances that occur within the period. So if we're reconciling September, these were all these variances occurred in September. And now we can actually drill into them, find details, take the proper corrective actions, go ahead and get them zeroed out. So for example, GL balance, or GL batches, excuse me. These GL batches are just GL batches that aren't posted. All right, so what this is telling us is at the time that this report was run, there's $7,000 worth of GL batches that needed to be posted. So what do you suppose the corrective action for that would be? It's very simple, post the batch, right? It sounds simple, it is simple, but what we want to understand here is that we don't want to write journal entries, manual entries, for anything that appears on this line. That's not the corrective action. What we want to do is we want to get the details, which we can drill into, and then we want to go post those batches. Okay. Next, end of day. End of day are work orders and sales orders that appear in the item ledger. And by virtue of the fact that they appear in the item ledger means that I either ship confirmed it on a sales order, so my inventory has been reduced, or I've issued material to a work order, or I've completed a work order and I've changed my quantity on hand. Okay, but what I have not done yet is I have not created the GL batch for them, meaning those orders have not been processed through sales update or have not been processed through manufacturing accounting. Okay, so what's the corrective action on this line item? All right, on this line item, the corrective action is going to be process the order. So you'll get a list of work orders or sales orders, and you'll say, okay, these I have to get through sales update, or these I have to go through manufacturing accounting. That's what the activity is. Again, it sounds simple until you start drilling into the details and say, well, you know, I gotta have this list of work orders here, but the status on the work orders is 99, so they've already run through accounting. Well, that's not true, right? That's not how, we don't use status codes to tell us whether they've been accounted for or not. We use GL batch numbers. Okay, so if the item ledger record doesn't have a batch number on it, then it shows up as an end of day problem. What can happen is sometimes people can go to the work order headers, manually change the status, like say from 40 to 99, without picking up all the transactions and kind of skipping the accounting step. So that's why it's important to separate these and to understand what the correct corrective action is. Okay, the transactions, what that is going to be are the transactions that are done. They've been completed, they have batch numbers on, but the amounts don't match. Right, so my item ledger said one amount, my general ledger in the inventory account says another. Okay, so then we have to go in and do an analysis on those, find out what the problem is, correct our configuration or our process so that they don't recur. But in the meantime, right, we have to offset these with a manual journal entry. So this would be the only line item where a manual entry comes into play. All right. Cardex variance. What that means is my sum of my item ledger for any given part doesn't equal its balance. Okay, so much like on the general ledger side, if you add up all the transactions for a given period for an account, then my balance must be reflective of all of that. Well, the same for an item. You have an item that has a quantity on hand. Well, the sum of all of the transactions better equal that quantity on hand and the amount on hand. Otherwise, there's an integrity problem in your item ledger. Okay, so that needs to be addressed. Okay, so we have some there. And our corrective action here is going to be some type of inventory transaction to get our Cardex back in line. Okay, and of course, the manual entries are just what they say they are. They're the manual JEs that you enter into this account with the intent upon bringing it back into balance. Okay, so if you manage this on a daily or a couple times a week, you're taking a look at this, you're making sure that these things are hovering around zero and keeping this stuff clean. Then when it comes time to do the close, everything's in balance. You can produce your audit report just by clicking the button, and then you're good to go. Right, so that's how the reconciliation process works in RapidReconciler. Okay, now what makes this process different from, let's say, what JD Edwards offered or some of the other options that you may have run across? Well, first is, again, RapidReconciler is a complete database. So what we like to do is load data when we first install for at minimum the current fiscal year, right? So here it is October. If you were running calendar year, we installed this afternoon, we'd be pulling data from January all the way through up till today. Okay, you would get a reconciliation balance for every period end. And we would make sure that everything rolls forward so nothing is, slipping in the couch cushions per se. All right, so we do those validations. Okay, robust transaction matching. Now there are some products out there that offer transaction matching, and JD Edwards is one of them. They have an internal transaction match. Now, where the robust part comes in is we take it the extra mile. It's one thing to say, for example, a purchase order receipt, like say OV1234. Is that in the general ledger? So I'm looking at the item ledger. Here's the transaction. It's OV1234. Can I find it in the general ledger? Okay. So we go and we match it up and we say OV1234. Oh, there it is. Okay. Here's the account. Here's the amount of that transaction. Does it match? Yes or no? Okay. Oh, it does match. Okay, this is reconciled. Well, wait a minute. Okay. Where in that transaction matching process do they account for the period? Okay, it's matched, but is it in the right period? Or it's matched, is it in the right account? Okay, so with RapidReconciler, we take it the extra mile. Not only does it have to be in the general ledger, not only does it have to match by document, we also have to match in the right period and in the account that it's expected to go to. Right, so if your DMAIs, for example, aren't configured correctly, and yes, these transactions are showing up in the general ledger, but they're not even posting to the right account, well, then they're technically not really reconciled, are they? Right, so that's what the robust transaction matching does. to make sure it's in the right account, the right period, the right amount for every transaction that you do. Okay, and I talked about quantifying all the sources of variance. Again, so that kind of backs up this whole thing about the roll forward. So if we add up all the different variance sources that we track and summarize them, the variance amount total equals the difference in the balance between the subledger and the ledger. And that's how we know everything is accounted for, right? So nothing's missing, nothing's hidden. Okay, so with that said, let me go ahead and bring up the product itself, okay? And I'll kind of give you an idea. We'll give you a bigger picture about what's going on here, right? So this is what RapidReconciler looks like. The user interface is web-based. Okay, so there's nothing to install on an end user's machine. You go ahead and log into a website. Okay, navigation on the side here, you see that we have inventory where we can navigate. We have in transit. Now, what in transit is, in our case, are the STOT orders. Okay, so goods in transit are I am transferring material from branch plant A to branch plant B. Okay, and then we have our PO receipts, which is our received not vouchered. The bulk of this presentation is going to be surrounded around the inventory module, because we can demonstrate more things here. Okay. Now, when I look and I first come in, this is the reconciliation page, and this is where the application defaults to go. And what you'll see along the top is you'll see we have some status lights here, and this will adopt to the red-green philosophy, meaning that if the light's red, something is amiss. Okay, so we have two indicators here. Our validation light means that the roll forward from the prior period is working. So remember how I said we do this carry forward. We want to make sure that we're not losing anything as we switch from period to period. Okay, so you see green lights, life is good. All right. The system status, this is a batch process. We run it once a night to update this data. And we want to make sure that the job actually completed successfully, right? So we'll see our last time it ran, how long it took, how long it takes on average, so we can kind of track to make sure everything is moving along okay. And then finally up here, we can see all the different periods that we can go and have access to. Okay, so we have quite a bit of data. We have a couple of years worth here. Okay, so we can go back and see that, right? Now, in the filter section, what we have is we can start filtering, and notice these filterings are account number based. Okay, they're not item based. This is a reconciliation tool. We are reconciling accounts. Okay, so we will see currencies, companies, business units, objects, subsidiaries. Those are your filter options. Okay, if you have more than one company that you track in your instance of JD Edwards, okay, you will see the company numbers here. We license this product by company number, not by end user number. Okay, so you buy one license for one company, and you can have as many end users as you would like. Okay, there is security settings here by user. So if you have a multi-company environment, but your end users are only responsible for one company, we can set the security up accordingly. Okay. Okay. So filters, you see the check boxes, and it means exactly what you think it means. Is if I want to eliminate something, I can just click the button and just focus on what I want to focus on. Okay. And what I'm going to do as we go through this clean the first time is I'm going to show you the just the company 10 piece of this. Okay. Now, down here, you'll see the valuation and the variance as we had shown on the slides. We have a drill down widget to help us find, if there's a large variance, where the largest variance are to help us focus. And what I find really helpful is this out of balance history. In a perfect system, we would be flatlined at 0. So this is the out of balance amount, period by period by period. And the perfect solution is to have zeros, right? So I can click on the dot here. It will change the period up here to whatever corresponds to the data point here. And notice this says 0 out of balance. Look at my inventory. Here's my GL, here's my perpetual. It's perfect. Okay. I started with a big carry forward. All right. We had some transactional variance, right? All my batches were posted, all my orders were processed. We had some transactional problems. We had a journal entry to clean it all up, and I start at 0. Now, when I carry forward, right, I'm going to carry forward 0 to the next period. So watch what happens, right? So this 262 here is going to change, right? So now I carry forward 0 because I was in balance in the last period. Posted all my batches, processed all my orders. Yeah, we had some glitches in some transactions. I journalized them. We're back to 0. This is what a perfectly functioning system should look like. Okay. Yes, this is going to happen. Yes, people make mistakes. Yes, there are new configurations that get added, or somebody changes a setting, sets up a new version of a program, and the processing options didn't react as expected. So sometimes these things happen. We fix them, we note them, and we move forward. Okay, so notice I look at this and I'm saying, wow, this has been a pretty good operation. All right, now the data that we're looking at here actually came from one of our customer systems. They were kind enough to let me use it. They had been using RapidReconciler for a few years before this. They zero things out every month. Okay, little bit of a glitch here. We can see, well, what was that? Right, started at 0, had some transactions. Ooh, we over journalized. Right? So notice as I hover over the line, sometimes you see this little icon here. There's a preview icon. Well, what are those journal entries? Well, I can go ahead, I can click on it, and here's a list of all the journal entries and who made them and how much they are. And you can start taking a look at some of these if you want to know what the details are behind some of this. These variant sources all have, okay, drill downs where you can go and get the details. Okay, so transactions we're going to talk about in a minute here. But you see they over journalized and then corrected it the next period. So here's our carry forward. Okay, we fixed it. Now we're back to 0. Life goes on. Okay, we get to the current period, right? We're operating, look, all zeros, a little bit of transactions. We have some Cardex variance that has yet to be dealt with. We'll deal with that, get that back to 0. Life is good. Okay, so that's how we work it. It's actually a pretty simple process. All your data is in one place. You're not putting spreadsheets together anymore, right? You're not manipulating data. We put it together for you. Okay, we have a process internally where we use your geo class codes and your DMAI setup to figure out what accounts are your inventory accounts, what items to group together automatically. That means the raw material purchase component, whatever your classifications are. So we can put it together by individual account, you know, object and subsidiary. Okay. Now, when we start talking about some transactions, and let me get to a period that has a decent amount. Okay, so there's our 37,000, and I want to see what's behind these transactions because it's a little bit more complicated, right? So now I view the details. We have this whole separate page just for the transactions now. And what this page does is it breaks everything down now so you can get a high level view of where the issues actually are. And then we can start drilling into some of the details and start looking, you know, trying to find the root cause. Okay, and RapidReconciler provides a lot of information in directing you to what the root cause actually is, right? So for example here, we're going to take all of the transactions and break them down into these types: the inventory, manufacturing, sales, and if there were purchasing failures, you would see purchasing as a fourth. There's some subtypes that we create if they're intercompany, if they're just regular transfers, and there's a few other categories that you don't see here at the moment. Okay, we're going to break down by order types and document types. Okay, over here now we can get some of the subtotals. So it says of all of these 457 rows that make up this variance, there's only one inventory transaction. There's 417 manufacturing transactions, 39 sales, and here's the amounts that they account for. Okay, so now we can start focusing, and just for sake of discussion, let's focus on this one inventory, because I have a Cardex here, but I don't have a general ledger, right? My general ledger is 0, and there's only one of them. So I can come over here and just isolate this and say, what is that inventory transaction? There it is. Okay, look at the subtype, what it says, net 0 AAI. So we've done an inventory adjustment on this, but the DMAIs are set up such that the debit and credit come in and out of the same account. So I have reduced my inventory by $22, but I did not reduce it on the GL. So by definition, that's variance. Okay. Now, you can see that at the upper level, this is like a document level type summarization to get item details. There's a drill down. Now we can get all the Cardex records, all the GL records, all the different details that make up this transaction. And we can do an analysis by exporting this to Excel and then just taking a look at it. And we can see everything we need to know about what that transaction entailed, why it failed, and what we need to do to go ahead and fix things so that we don't keep seeing these same failures in the future. Okay. All right. Okay, some of the other things, we have a complete as of. So to back up that perpetual balance number that you see, if we come over to the as of page, okay, and this just takes a few seconds to populate here, what we're going to get is a complete listing of all of the items that make up that perpetual balance. So here you'll see it over here. There are 41,000 line items here, okay, that make up this inventory. It can be exported to Excel, summarized, and it's an as of. So this is reflective of whatever period that you have selected. An one feature that we've added in the last couple of years that a lot of our customers have asked for is a daily as of. So yes, the period ended on July 30th, but if I want to know what the inventory was on any given day, I can select this number here. Okay. All right. Okay, so that's very, very helpful. We have filters and we have expansion here, and the expansion here will take this item and its balance and break it down, and you will get a listing of all the different transactions that roll up to that balance. Okay, so we can back up all of our balances with the transactional details. Okay, another thing that has proven to be very helpful is we have an item roll forward. Okay, so we can take it and we set a date range. So this start date of 7/3, between 7/3 and 7/30. Okay, it will give us a list of all the items in the system. It'll give us the beginning balance. It will give us how many were received, how many were issued to work orders, how many were adjusted at inventory, how many were shipped, how many were returned, and give us an ending balance. So we set those dates. Okay, and then obviously this one's taking a second to populate. There we go. Okay, we get those dates over here. Here's the closing balance. So now we can get a material usage, right? We get a material usage for whatever date range that we decide to enter. So it can be quite the span here. So it's more useful information. Okay, and importantly, we have built in a series of integrity reports. And these integrity reports help us identify potential issues in your system configuration so that we can just keep those transactional variances from happening in the first place. Like, for example, we have what's called a model table. We use 4152 in your DMAIs, and we select the document type as a cross-reference to say, you know what? This GL class code is actually a raw material that belongs to account 145000, and BRKR belongs to the same account, but a BUYP belongs to 142000, so on and so forth, right? So this establishes the groupings. We just use your DMAI tables to do that. So you have full control over what gets counted, when it gets counted, and how it gets counted, right? What account it actually gets grouped into, right? So we use your information to do that. And once we have that, Okay, now we can look at all the rest of your DMAIs and say, you know what, these are potential issues you just might want to look at. And so here's an example. Here's one of those net zeros where, you know, the debit and credit are going to wash out, right? So no GL impact. Here, the object account doesn't line up with what our model says, right? So more net zeros. So you'll have mismatch business unit, mismatch subsidiary, whatever we find as we do an analysis of these tables. And what you do is you look through these and say, ooh, you know, maybe we have to make some changes to our DMAI so that the accounting works properly for all of our different transactions. Okay, so that's one report. You know, are we missing any unit of measure conversion factors, right? Like this item doesn't have a pound to feet. So we've transacted in pounds. The primary's feet, we don't know how to get from pounds to feet. There's no conversion factor in place. So we need to go back in JD Edwards and fix that so that we can roll the quantities correctly. Okay. Geo class integrity. Does a geo class for any given item on the branch equal what's on the location? And this is important. Manufacturing accounting uses the geo class from the branch, but all other transactions use it from the location, right? So we don't want to create a variance because the geo classes mean different things on the different levels in JD Edwards, right? NS40 is non-stock. SECD is stock. Well, what is this item? Is it stock or is it non-stock? If it's on a work order, the system's going to treat it as non-stock. If it's on a sales order, it's going to treat it as stock. That's not good, right? We need to have consistency there. So these type of reports here, frozen costs, right? Do we need to re-roll any items? Okay, clean cutoff, right? Do we actually post our transactions in the same period in which they occurred, right? If we don't, well, we may have to look at our processes so we don't have to do any accruals at the end of the month, right? So in case of work order, if I complete it on the last day of the month, I don't want to be posting it on the first day of the next month. I want to post it on the same day it was completed. Okay, so those type of things. Okay, so on a very high level, that's what inventory looks like. If we were to look at in transit, goods in transit, it's a very, very similar process. Okay, but the accounts here are the in transit account. They're not the perpetual accounts. Okay, we have a very similar process, very similar categories. Okay, same type of thing. We can get, you know, all of our transfer orders are listed here, and we can do an analysis on what's in transit right at the moment. We have also built an in transit as of. So you look at in transit as of, and this does not exist in JD Edwards, right? So we've built something where you can, by any period, go to see what was in transit over time. And that's how we can do a reconciliation. Okay, and PO receipts is a little bit different because we are not able to build an as of for PO receipts. That's not possible with the data that's provided in JD Edwards. And you'll notice there's no period end up here on this module. Okay, so, but what we do have, our customers like this. Okay, we can focus and say, okay, of all the POs, you know, what hasn't been reconciled? So of all of these items, all the POs that are out there that have had receipts that haven't been vouchered, this is the only one that didn't reconcile. So there's only one. Okay, if I were to look and say, if I put all the orders here, okay, there's 427 purchase orders, only one didn't reconcile. Right, so we're able to find it pretty darn quickly. Okay, so basically that's how RapidReconciler works. Okay, it's a very simple process. We just learn what these line items mean and what the corrective action is. We use our drill downs to get into the details. We make the corrections, we move forward. And what the bottom line is we take time out of the period end close. We make the process simple so you know where to look and you know what to do. And that helps us eliminate wasteful time, eliminate stressful days, especially during the close. Maybe eliminate some overtime so you don't have to stay all night to work on things, and make for a more pleasant experience. Okay, so with that, I'd like to turn it back over, and we can address any questions that you might have.
Sure. Thanks, Ed. I really appreciate your time on this. And it doesn't look like we've gotten too many questions as of yet. So we'll go ahead and I know, Ed, you may have some questions that you would have gotten directly or on your side if you want to go ahead and start those.
Okay, yeah, let me do that. So some of the typical questions that we do get in a session like this, or people will ask, well, what versions of JD Edwards will Rapid Reconciler support? And the answer to that is all versions, right? So what we do is we access the data tables. So the actual version of the application doesn't really matter. The data set that we use, that we copy out of JD Edwards, it has been consistent for many, many, many years. So the tools releases don't matter. The versions of JD Edwards don't matter. Rapid Reconciler works for all of the different versions. Now, as far as installing Rapid Reconciler and getting it up and running, it typically, we do the installation remotely. We need to set it up on the server and get that stuff running. It takes just a few hours, and we work with your IT department to do that. Then we'll do an initial data load. We'll let that run overnight, and then the next day we get back together, and just to make sure everything worked okay and everything looks fine. Okay. Now, as far as the end users go, and what does end user training look like? Well, we actually have an online training module that we provide, and you go through. It takes you through the screens. It takes you through all the different variances, what you're supposed to do. And it has examples, those types of things, and it's work at your own pace. So we certainly make that available to you. Now, another topic that comes up quite a bit is data security, right? Because obviously you're looking at a web browser, and as soon as you start looking at that and you start seeing dollars and all these types of numbers appear in a browser, the IT departments will come and say, well, how is this data secure? Well, what we do is we provide the application, the actual web pages, data free from the cloud, right? So if you log into our website, you would see empty screens, right? The only way that you actually see your business data is if you are on your work network. So if you are on site, you'll see data. If you are at home, you must VPN into your network. Otherwise, all these screens will be empty. We do not host your data. Your data remains behind your firewall on premise. Okay, so that's how we do it. So it's a little bit of a hybrid solution. It's actually quite clever, and it does address those security concerns. Okay, so those are the typical questions I get, Mike. Has anything else come up in the meantime?
It doesn't look like we have anyone else, and everyone, you can feel free to add your questions in the chat, and they'll pop up. But I don't think we've had any additional questions. What is there? I've got a question. Is there a consistent problem that Rapid Reconciler really does well? Like out of the box, what are people most appreciative of once they decide Rapid Reconciler is a good solution? What are you seeing, and how have you responded over the life of Rapid Reconciler to those needs that our customers have had?
Okay, well, the first thing right out of the box is the focus.
Yeah.
Right. So everything is broken up into the categories. So when we're talking about the GL batches, end of day transactions, part X, right? Pretty easy to understand. Right? So once you get that, and now you know exactly where to look, right? The fact that we provide the details and that they're easily accessible. So you'll see here that we go into, like, say, one of these grids for the journal entries. There's always an export button to Excel. So if you want to throw the data in Excel to email it to somebody, or to do pivot tables or whatever you want to do, it's pretty easy to get at. They also appreciate the fact that we can help them with audits, right? So they're under audit. They need to prove, like I said, an item is rolled forward or get transactional details. They can get those reports directly out of Rapid Reconciler. IT departments like it because it gets them away from having to do ad hoc reporting.
Mm.
right? So end users can get all the information that they need. They don't need any special reports. So there's quite a few. There's a big list of
Sure.
things that people appreciate.
Yeah. Well, in that same vein, are there maybe some examples of a customer story where they helped out with something you didn't expect, or they used it in a way that you didn't anticipate? Just maybe or even just a kind of a customer story of an example of, I know I'm putting you on the spot here, but I'm just trusting your affable personality and working directly with our customers. You might have a story or two that about the practical application of Rapid Reconciler in the field, so to speak.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I do, and I have one that comes to mind because it's fairly current. So we had a prospect at the time who was struggling with their inventory, and their reports that they were running, they were thinking that they had a huge problem with their Cardex integrity. So basically this line right here, okay? They had actually gone down the path of writing a custom program to adjust their inventory balances based on a summarization of the Cardex records, right? So they wrote the actual program to do it. And they would come up with a list and say, okay, this item is this much off, and this item is this much off, whatever. So they reached out and decided to talk to us. And what we offered them was something called the proof of concept, where we would say, okay, let us just take a quick snapshot of your data, let Rapid Reconciler do the math, and let's confirm what it is that your report is showing you. Okay, so we did that. And as it turned out, they didn't have any problems with their inventory. Rapid Reconciler was saying every single item added up perfectly. So we took their report and got a few of the items that came out as discrepant. We looked at some of the details, and their report had forgotten to do some unit of measure conversions, right? So transactions that weren't primary, they weren't finding the conversion factor because they weren't looking for it correctly. And so they were treating some of these transaction quantities as though they were in primary unit of measure, even though they weren't, right? So bottom line is, if they had invoked that program, there would have been quite a mess on their hands. They would have really made a mess of their system. And we proven to them that they didn't need to do anything, right? That their system was actually working, and they were making journal entries they didn't need to make.
That's the solution to the problem is in less work. I can't imagine a better better answer than that. Really the last question I have, and we could kind of wrap up, is there anything that either customers have requested or that the team is working on to add or make better in upcoming versions of Rapid Reconciler, or are you just trying to kind of refine what currently is working really well? What would Rapid Reconciler look like in 2 or 3 years, would you think? Or even, maybe in the next 6 months or a year?
Okay. Well, we always have our ears open. And one of the things that we do consider is, would there be a market for any like additional modules? So for example, I get asked a lot about, are you going to do accounts receivable and accounts payable? And the answer is, well, JD Edwards does that pretty well. So why would we do that? And invest the time and money into something that is not really an issue, right? So what's difficult for us to come up with as far as adding new modules is what's broken. Right?
Yeah.
JD Edwards is a pretty good system. Now, there are some new things that JD Edwards is doing, right? Something like they have outbound consignment now. So there's an opportunity there, but outbound consignment is fairly new and not a lot of people are using it, right? So we do have our ears to the train tracks here as far as looking for things where people are coming back and saying, we're using this, but we really could use some help on the reconciliation front. And of course, we're always doing minor improvements. The product works. We take feedback all the time. If there's like additional report, and sometimes we add custom reports, right? Some of the features that you see here now, like the daily as of, we added that based on request, right? So we do those improvements all the time. But the major ones that will make a step change, we just have to be a little bit careful with that to make sure that there's an actual problem that needs addressing.
For sure. Well, that's all the questions I have, and it doesn't look like anyone else has added anything in the chat. So Ed, I'll turn it over to you to wrap up if you have anything, or to the conference team.
Well, I just like to thank everybody for attending today. And if you have any additional questions, you want to reach out to me directly, please feel free to do so. I think you will be offered the opportunity to get the slide deck or recording of this, and you'll see my contact information. So just email me and I'll be happy to answer.
Outstanding. Thanks for your time, Ed. And thank you everyone for joining us. We appreciate your time, and you will be receiving the slide deck and links later on, I believe. So thanks, and have a great rest of your conference.